This is After Effects, mainly used for animation, motion design, finishing off video stuff. Very powerful program which can do a hell of a lot of different things. So we're just going to be taking you through it, the bare basics, show you what's what, and hopefully it doesn't look as intimidating as it first seems. It doesn't turn out to be as intimidating as it first seems. So first thing I'll do is go into the project window. This is where you keep all your assets, folders, timelines, footage, everything like that. I have the layout set to small screen. These window panels you can drag around, so you can move effect controls there. Personally, I prefer it back there. So here in project, I'll hit Command N. It'll create a new comp for me. Okay, by default, it'll go back to the last setting that you had. Generally, we'll be working at 1920 by 1080, 25 frames a second. So there's a whole bunch of presets there. The latest version of After Effects should have this one at the top. So as you can see, 1920 by 1080, and we can lock the aspect ratio as well, 16 by 9. So that would mean, say if I just make that, give it a random prime number, 713 perhaps, I don't know, maybe that's a prime number. You'll still keep it at 16 by 9. Go back to 1080. Square pixels, pretty much everything will be the square pixel. 25 frames a second. Resolution 1/3, we can change that as we go, but that's just more for previews and display. Your start frame, this case will be at 0, and your duration is 125 frames, so 5 seconds. So that's pretty basic stuff, and we'll hit OK to OK that. You can change this over here at some point if you need. You can scrub along the timeline if you choose. And we can also change the settings for that as well over here. Time display style. Now we can go back to time code, which will be seconds and frames. So watch how it changes over there. It'll change down here. See? Now it's 1 second and 12. Okay, so first thing we can do is if we hit, you can do right click, new, solid, and this basically creates a shape, a square or rectangle, that if you just set it to make comp size, it will fill the screen. So in this case it's going to be orange. I'm just going to delete that. Another thing we can do is hit Command and Y, or Control Y if you're on Windows, and the same thing comes up. I tend to use keyboard shortcuts as much as possible because it's quicker and easier. I'll just hit OK. Boom. Now there are a fair few plugins and presets available. Now there's a whole lot of extra ones, some of which are free, some of which you got to pay for. Video Copilot does some really good ones, and they should be available for you to download. If you go have a look on videocopilot.net, it's got a bunch of really good tutorials and a bunch of really good plugins. So with the layer selected, we can go up to Effect. We go down to Noise and Grain. There's a lot here. You know, some of these I've paid for and some of them are free. Most of them are bundled with After Effects, but Noise and Grain, we go to Fractal Noise. Where are we? Fractal Noise is one of the most versatile and widely used effects in After Effects. It's, I guess you could call it procedural. The main thing I use it for would be to drive the animations of other layers. So, which is what we're going to do here. Basically, it's kind of like clouds. There's a whole load of different parameters within it. If we go look, and we can turn it into blocks. It's actually the basis of a glitch animation, but or you can use linear or soft spline or whatever. There's a whole load of different options there. Soft, linear, whatever works. Okay, I'm going to leave it at basic, and I'm going to set a keyframe, which is done by this little icon here. It's called stopwatch, and at that particular moment in time we're going to have the brightness value set to 0. So in order to see our keyframes, and there will be many as you progress with After Effects, select the layer and hit U on the keyboard, and all your keyframes will show up. If you have no keyframe set, nothing happens. So just going to go to the end of the timeline. I'm going to change my brightness to 100. It should turn to crazy white. There we go. Go back to the start. I'm going to make that minus 100. It's going to be black. Okay. If I take the playing head, drag it across, you can see what happens. Wow. Now we need that to move, because otherwise it's just like looking at cotton wool going from black to white. So I'll go back to start again, and I'll set a keyframe on evolution. I go to the end, and I'll change this value from 0 to 1. So the clouds should move and boil a bit. Add a bit more variety. We can also go to the transform parameter, go back to the start. Now we can see offset turbulence, set a keyframe for that perhaps. And these little crosshairs will tell you where the center of the effect is. So you can just move it to wherever you like. In this case I'm going to maybe put it down to the bottom, see how it looks. The key thing with After Effects is, when you're learning it, is to experiment. See what things do. Doesn't matter how ridiculous it looks. It's just trying to get a grip on what you can do with it. Yeah, and then that's what we've done. So if we have a look at, scrub through it a bit, cloud effect should kind of rise up. Groovy. I'm going to turn that off. Go over to my character panel. Cool. And go up to the toolbar up here. Click on T for type. I'm just going to make sure my center. I'm going to use center paragraph alignment. And this is how we can use fractal noise. Let's put an N in there, maybe spell noise correctly as well. Yeah, groovy, thank you. And we click outside the text layer to finish it up. Now selecting it, you can see you have your bounding box, these 8 squares around it, and you got your anchor point here. Now After Effects needs to be a little bit better on how it applies that, because it doesn't always put it in the dead center when you first type text. It seems to, for me anyway, it always puts it at the bottom of the first line. So there's a cool little extension or script, whatever you want to call it, plug-in for After Effects called Reposition Anchor Point. I have it there docked already. You get it from AE Scripts, download it, follow the instructions, and you will find it under Extensions. Sorry, Window, and it's down there, Sequence Layers. No, Sequence Layers, what I'm saying. It's there. Reposition Anchor Point. Boom. So what that will do is switch the anchor point to the geometric center of the layer, or to the far mid-right or mid-left of the layer, or the top right. You get the idea, just by using one of these 9 presets. You can move it yourself if you wish. You'd use the pan behind tool up here, and you hover over the anchor point, you drag it around. If that's what you need, go for it. In this case, we just need it to be center. So I'll take it back to the start of the keyframe of the sequence. Now if I hit P, position comes up. If I hit S, scale comes up. If I hit R, rotation comes up. If I hit A, anchor point parameter comes up. If I hit T, transparency or opacity in this case comes up. If you want to see all of them, you just click on this little drop down arrow and they all come down. Okay, so I'm just going to hit reset on everything. That's going to bring it center. I should do at least. So if I right click on any of these, I can go to reset, and because we're working 1920 by 1080 comp, that will be half and half. So 960 will be 960 from pixels from the left, and it'll be 540 from the top. 00 is there, 1920 by 1080 is there, and everything else in the middle. So for this case, we're just going to tap a keyframe for scale. Set a keyframe by hitting the keyframe icon. Change the text value to 80%. Go to the end. Make the keyframe at the end 100%. So it's going to scale up over time. In order to make the fractal noise, by the way, we always label our layers. In order to make the fractal noise cloudy style layer, animate this, what we'll do is use the track mat. Now track mats are usually they're usually here in these panels, so you can right click up this way and you can add or remove the views of a bunch of these. Generally by default you're mainly going to be using switches, modes, parent and link, occasionally stretch. That's more for editing, basic editing of footage. So your switches will be these guys here. So this refers to shy layers, hides the layer in the timeline. For collapse transformations, if it's another composition inside a composition, or if it's a vector layer, such as an Illustrator import or shape layer or solid, you can hit this and it just preserves perfect vector crispness. This is your quality switch. Just always keep it that way for best results. Effects turns on and off all the effects. Frame blending, which is more for, you'd use that with shot footage. Motion blur simulates motion blur on like you get in shot footage. Adjustment layer, which will mean that all the effects applied to that layer apply everything below it. And it's the 3D switch, and that allows them to be pushed away from you in Z space. It's different to scaling. It might look the same, but it's different. And then you got modes, which are your transfer modes. The same as Photoshop, plus a little bit more. So you can, there's not really much you can see with this because there's two different layers, but there's only two different layers. You got all the same stuff as Photoshop, you know, multiply, screen, add, overlay, etc. And a few more. Some really useful ones such as difference, stencil alpha, luma, silhouette, alpha, luma, and alpha add. Realistically, the main ones you'll use would be multiply, screen, overlay, and a few others in between, but usually a combination of them. And then we have a track mat. So that's where I can use the alpha channel of another layer or the brightness of another layer to affect the one I want. So I want my text to be affected by the brightness of my fractal noise. So I change it here by tapping on no mat and change it to fractal noise. So After Effects is now looking at, by default, the alpha channel, which it doesn't need to. It's to be the luma channel, which is the brightness. And now it's going to look at the brightness of our fractal noise. So at this point, fractal noise is 100% white. Boom. So, and we drag it to the back, it'll start. It'll be invisible because the fractal noise is black. And we'll hit spacebar to preview it. Once it's green, it plays in full speed. It can take a while depending on your effects and layers and everything. But you can see how it nice and neat and tidily just animates in. Kind of a smoky effect. Now, this is the simplest, most basic example of using a luma mat of one layer on top of to drive the animation of another. But you'd use this principle with stock footage of ink bleeds or smoke to composite text into, say, a battlefield or something, or to animate in other elements where it's kind of like that inky reveal, which I think I really quite like. It's very elegant looking. So I'll have a look at that now in a moment. So the easiest way to import stuff is to literally drag and drop it. So previewing in Finder, you just hit spacebar, boom. Another thing we can do is double tap over here in the project window, and we'll go to import, the import settings dialog. So go to ink bleeds. I had a look at these earlier. Number 4 is the one. So it comes in, usually these ink bleeds are quite large, but they're black and white and they're really useful. So what I'll do is I'll just drag it into my comp here. And as you can see, it's only 2 seconds long. And if I hit this little dot here, it solos it, as it's called. So it means I only see that layer. And I can drag this over. And because I'm working on a small laptop, 4K footage doesn't run too well. So that's okay, doesn't matter. In order to make the footage go all the way to the end, you got 2 options. One is to hit Command Alt and T to time remap. And that sets a keyframe at the very start, which is 0, 0, to where the footage actually starts and where the footage actually ends. And I can basically create a hold keyframe at any point, or at that point at the end, just by dragging it out. Or I can go to my columns list, go to column stretch. Now, this will be slightly different because what I was doing there with the time remapping is that it will play at 100% speed from the first keyframe to the second keyframe. When I stretch it, I'm going to get rid of those time remap keyframes. It slows it down. So I'll just stretch it out. So maybe 250 should work. I need to get to the end, so I'll just keep pushing it around. So cool, that'll do the job. Well, maybe 225, let's see. Actually, I'm going to scale it down. So I know it's 4K, so I'm just going to make it to 50%. So that will be the same size as the composition there. And I'm going to change the track matte to the ink transition. Now, if we watch what goes on here, it's actually going to disappear. The text will be there from the start because our ink layer starts off black and starts off white, my apologies, starts off white and then it becomes black over time. So I'll need to reverse it or invert it. And in this case, track mattes, we just go bang, we hit it there. And now it's going to invert it. Now this is going to take a while to preview, but let's see how it goes. You see how it kind of pops on here? Now that is because the text is scaling up, but the ink layer isn't. So one thing we can do is match the scale of the ink layer to the footage. So I'll just drag it back to the start. Now parent and link is something we have not looked at yet. And what that means is we can make one movement, one layer's movement be influenced by another. And there's a whole lot of other things you can do, but usually it's movement. That's the best way to think of it at first, like a small child following their parent. So we're going to make the text layer the parent for the ink layer. So what will happen here is as the text scales up, the ink layer will scale up. Let's see how that looks. You can also see how there's a bit of jitteriness in the footage layer, and that's because it's been slowed down by almost a lot, down to about 20 or 40%, between 20 and 40% of what its original speed was, because I've stretched it out. So there's intermediate frames that are missing somewhat. So just in the spirit of keeping things somewhat organized, I'm going to go over to the project window here, and I'm going to rename my comp from comp 1, which is the default, to fractal noise basics. Just call fractal noise version. and I'll duplicate it by hitting Command D. Okay. Now go back into fractal noise version, which is this one here, and I will set my track mat back to the fractal noise layer, just for reference. And I'll turn off the inverted option for the Luma mat, so it'll start on black. I don't need my ink layer anymore for this one, so I'll delete it. Go back to fractal noise version 2. If I double click on it, it'll open up. Now if I go into my comp settings, we hit Command K or Control K on Windows, and I'm just going to make this call it ink bleed version. Everything else stays the same. Now I can get rid of fractal noise, I don't need it anymore. So these are like two very basic versions of using one layer to drive another, and very basic parenting for your scaling for your track mat, just to keep it nice and neat and tidy. Now when you want to export these, you got a couple of different ways of doing it. You can do it through After Effects, which tends to be the most robust and powerful way to do it. Just the way Media Encoder works, I don't think it tends to be as quick as After Effects. But Media Encoder, up until recently, had the H.264 thing, which After Effects bizarrely didn't have. That's changed now. So we got a couple of different ways to export via After Effects. And the first will be Command, Shift, and /, and that will send your currently active comp to what's called the render queue. If you've exported stuff from Premiere, it works more or less the same way. Premiere would either do it itself or send to Media Encoder, and this is After Effects version of it. So we have a few different options here. I've got a bunch of little presets and everything set up. These H.264 ones are After Effects' standard ones, and they are more than adequate. So lower quality, medium, very high quality. So you don't need it that high. This will do the job for you for now. Output it to, you got to find a place to export it to. So we click on that, and it'll pop up. Tutorial projects. For me, this is going to be all right. I'm just going to hit save, and that's where it's going to go to. Actually, I'm going to change that. That's why I'm going to put a new folder in there. Okay, so the render is finished, and it's taken a minute and 46 for the version with the ink bleed and 47 seconds for the version with the fractal noise. Actually, quite a while. This is a 2015 laptop, so that's why. Anything more recent should be a lot quicker. But that was just an introduction to After Effects, like the interface and the basic sort of things you can do with it. Tiniest of text animations. Be going into more stuff later in the next tutorial. We'll catch you another time.